there's people standing there. There are chairs in the front.
Yeah, we urge some of you. We've got 4 seats up front. If anybody wants a really good seat, come on up.
We don't bite.
I'm just gonna kick this off. My name is Alta Budin. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This gallery is called Roundabouts Now. I run it with Craig Monteith, who is in the back taking pictures. But we have been open since March, and we're super thrilled to have Viktorsha as our very first solo show, and have this incredible panel here and all of you here to talk about it, and a lot of other extremely interesting things. I have my, I'm not great at public speaking. This panel is going to be recorded and archived by Radio Kingston, who are also super thrilled to have here. In the back, which maybe we'll bring up front and pass them around, but there's like some note cards, and if you guys want to write questions for the panelists on them during the talk, we can pass them up. Yeah, so with no further ado, I am going to introduce our moderator, who I'm standing in front of, Zoraida Lopez-Diago. And I'm going to just read her bio, because it's extremely impressive. Zoraida Lopez-Diago is a photographer, curator, and activist whose work centers the African diaspora, focusing on gender, incarceration, migration, and climate change. She has exhibited across the Americas and lectured at Harvard University, the Tate Modern, and la Universidad de Antiquia. In 2022, she curated Picturing Black Girlhood, the largest exhibition on Black girls globally, and co-founded Women Picturing Revolution, co-editing Black Matrilineage, Photography, and Representation. An environmental activist, she is the co-founder of Conservationists of Color and serves as vice president at the Glenwood Center for Regional Food and Farming. She lives in Beacon, New York with her family.
Thank you, and thanks to Viktorsha. Thank you for inviting me. I'm going to read the panelists' bios and then go over a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll begin. Marielena Ferrer is an artist. I'm starting with you. Is an artist, advocate whose practice explores art's role in social change through political, public, and community engagement. She's the recipient of the International Sculpture Center's 2023 Outstanding Student Achievement Award and the 2024 Ulster County's Executive Art Award. She creates work that bridges personal and collective memory, combining social practice and object making. Beyond her practice, Marielena serves as the executive director of Unición Arts in New Paltz and leads Huminante, a diversity and inclusion consulting organization. She also sits on the board of Family of Woodstock and advisory boards of Arts Mid-Hudson and the Center of Photography at Woodstock. And I have known Marielena in other capacities through environmental work, and was just so pleased to see her when I walked through the door. So it's really nice to be reuniting with her in this way. Judit German-Heins is a Hungarian-American photographer. She creates handmade images using historical photographic processes to draw parallels between contemporary issues in women's rights, immigration, politics, and history. Judit was the recipient of the Dennis Russell Award in 2024. She has participated in group shows domestically and internationally. Her year-long residency at the Erie Canal Museum resulted in a 3-artist show at the Everson Museum of Art in 2025 titled At Water's Edge, Reflections on 200 Years of the Erie Canal. She was a critical mass finalist in 2023 and 2019. Viktorsha Uliyanova is a multidisciplinary artist and educator working with alternative photography, video, and fiber art. Her work explores impermanence, the notions of home and cultural identity, narrated through the prisms of memory. Her practice is informed by her upbringing in the Soviet Union, political repression, and the immigrant experience. In her research, Viktorsha uses archives to explore neglected and overlooked histories. Her work has been exhibited at the Samuel Dorsky Museum of Art, Baxter Street, MoMA PS1, Participant Inc., Collarworks, among others. She is a recipient of a NYSCA grant, the Arts Mid-Hudson Grant, Women's Studio Workshop, Sojourner Truth Diversity Fellowship. She lives in the Hudson Valley and teaches at SUNY New Paltz. So today's panel really brings together three incredible artists and women who explore the world not only as it is, but are really thinking about how are we reshaping the social cultural landscapes that we're moving through. Their work asks us to consider visual storytelling in a new light, in a different light that I feel like we all need to consider the world around us in this moment. And really how visual representation is a powerful force that forces us to challenge and reimagine not only historical narratives, but our possible futures. So I just kind of wanted to give a little framework of the conversation that we're having today. We're going to be exploring three themes. We're going to start with personal histories and memory, then we'll talk about materials and processes, and then we'll talk about migration and politics. I'm thrilled to be in dialogue with the three of you today, truly. And I invite all of us to listen deeply, reflect openly, and allow ourselves to be transformed by the stories and the insights that they share. So with that, let's begin. Marielena, briefly, can you give us, in your own words, a brief intro to your work?
Brief.
Brief.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. This is great. Thank you, all of you, for coming. Well, my work is a little bit complicated to understand at times because I work both with the concept that eventually is calling my attention, but also tied to the metaphors of the material. So, and I work with the two of them together. So, but what my work really wants to convey is to bring stories that maybe are not the most talk about, or those stories that the society maybe are not putting in the front of the newspaper. So I try to look for those histories that are on the margin and that maybe are overlooked or non-value at all.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, and Judit?
Yeah, thank you again, Viktorsha, for inviting us. My work is very similar to yours in a very different way. And what is relevant today is my refugee and immigrant work that I've been doing for the past, let's say, 8 years or more. Yeah, 8 years. It started in 2015. I'm from Hungary. And I started working on the topic of immigration when my country, Hungary, closed the border in front of Syrian refugees in 2015. And at that time, I lived in Houston, and I was outraged, obviously, and started to volunteer with refugee services in Houston. And that triggered my three body of works. The first one was digital in content of working with refugee families that were that arrived around that time, around past 2 years, with the settlement agency, and that work, because of the vulnerable community that I photographed, I decided not to make a personal body of work out of it. I just left it with the agency. But after that, I started to photograph refugees with my process who arrived much earlier, so they were much more stable, stably settled with my technique, Vapid Collodion. And the third work was with the Ferrer Center of Culture or Immigrant Culture and Immigration History, where we worked with the Kingston Library. It was a collaborative project between the two organizations. The Kingston Library did an oral history project, collecting histories or oral histories of immigrants in the area, particularly in Kingston, which later on extended to Ulster County. And I was the photographer for that project, so we kind of worked together to bring an oral history and visual history project together that was in display in the Ferrer Center for 2 years.
Thank you. And Viktorsha?
Hi. Thank you all for being here, and for Roundabouts Now for hosting this panel, to Craig and Alta, and for all these amazing artists, and for everyone that came out. And my mom is here. It means a lot to have her here. So my work, I research memory, and particularly the way that memory shapes national identity, history, and the future. I'm really interested in the way that what we choose to remember and the spaces of public memory that we see across the current cultural landscape, how that is a reflection of what is happening in the country, and the way that specifically the archives that we work with and what we choose to remember, how that reshapes not only our present but our future. So specifically my work deals with the Soviet regime and the way that the Soviet Union has used cultural repressive tactics to control national identity. So that's kind of specifically what my work is based, but right now I'm also thinking about what it means to be an immigrant in this country right now, in this given time, with the current political climate, and also to think about what it means to be an immigrant and not being able to return to the land that you are from, but also to be in between the two worlds, to be at the same time not being able to return to where you're from due to maybe political climate, but also to be othered in the place here in the United States. So that's kind of where my focus is right now.
You know, I had this kind of first question in mind, but I wanted to dig a little deeper in a phrase that you use, what we choose to remember, and kind of the shaping and the reshaping of our current moment and our futures. And Viktorsha, can you talk about how that relates to the title of the show, and how that connects to histories of migration or displacement, and how that shapes and reshapes memory and identity?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, the title of the show is Quieter Than Water, Lower Than Grass, as it's right next door. So if you haven't seen it yet, I hope you can take a look. I'm also wanting to note that the reason why I chose all these artists, and I think we all work across disciplines, and while our work perhaps deals with different materials and processes, what unites all of us is that we are working with histories that perhaps are often invisible and not seen. So the title of the show came from a Soviet idiom of not speaking up, not being able to share your story in a collective manner, and the way that the Soviet regime has used this idiom as a way to disseminate a certain ideology, and to create a uniform and homogenous culture and regime, and repress stories that are often told by folks who are from marginalized backgrounds, from backgrounds who are often vulnerable members of society. So specifically, I wanted to show the work from women's perspective, and matrilineal, redefine everything in a matrilineal term. So even though perhaps the work is quiet, I wanted to think about the way that what we see in maybe history books and what we read about, what we hear, is often maybe not the full story, right? So what we really have to question the archives. I guess that's where I'm at. And often the archives is the stories that we share here in this space, in this room, and at kitchen tables. So how the domestic space can also be an archive that needs to be told publicly. So I hope that answered.
Yeah. I mean, one thing, when I looked at all of your works is kind of this idea of radical imagining, right? It's like, how do women artists, immigrant women artists, really kind of navigate this tension between being defiant, the vulnerability that Viktorsha just mentioned, caution, and redefining in a matrilineal term, right? And Marielena and Judit, I wonder, like, how do you navigate this kind of tension in your creative process?
Well, at least for me, that tension is almost, present every place. The work that we do, yeah, that's true. Viktorsha was mentioning the vulnerabilities, but at the same time, the resilience and the strength that comes with that. So that tension that goes from one extreme to the other, and then as women and immigrants, we are also sort of like implicitly charged with the stewardship of whatever is that, I don't know if to call it defiance, rebel. We are sort of like a rebel with a cause. We are rebel with a cause. But we are the stewards, the custodians, but at the same time, the ones that are challenging the official histories or the dominant narratives that are out there. So part of our work is to really question those narratives, not because we want to rewrite them, but we want to offer a full perspective of that, right? So yes, there is a main narrative that is there. We're not going to say that it's not true, but we also want to bring the other narratives that are being left behind, or as Viktorsha put it, that society prefers not to remember or not to bring for whatever reason, normally because they are painful, and it's hard for us to look at pain with our plain face. But I think that's the role that I see also in our work. It's like, yes, we have this to say too, and we take it as our duty to do so.
Yeah, I have a very similar view of what you were saying, that we as privileged, in my case, white artists, I feel the responsibility to elevate voices that are unheard. And with refugees, well, I had kind of a long history of why I chose to tell their stories the way I did, and not going to tell my own story as an immigrant connected to your work. I just let me just tangentially kind of compliment your work and how I felt about it, looking at it, because it's connected to the topic. Is that when I walked into that room, it was so very personal, because growing up in a communist country, just like you did in Russia, I I was a pioneer, you know. We all had to put up the little what's it called, neckties and walk around and go to camps, and we were indoctrinated there, and we have to pledge allegiance to the Soviet Union, and that's where I grew up. So when I walked into that room, that's all was a big flashback of what she's saying, that, you know, that oppression really works its way through the minds, and in my family, my grandmother was always telling me, be quiet, you can't talk about the regime, you have to put it under the rug, and she was telling me stories of World War II and after, during the occupation of the Soviet, that we were not allowed to tell anyone that we were listening to Voice of America, for example. And I just recently found out that my grandfather was taken away when my father was about 8 years old to a labor camp because he was making a joke of the dictator at that time was in Hungary. So growing up with that, I couldn't, and then moving to this country, I couldn't kind of start talking about my own experience, because growing up I learned that I can't. But I had feelings, and then after what happened in Hungary, I decided to use the voice of refugees to kind of put my feelings around it as well. So I wanted to kind of experience immigration through their eyes, and that's what happened looking at your work, and it also creates a tension between, you know, the narrative that we tell as photographers and what others experience, or I experience, and what the people I photograph experience. So yes.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, Viktorsha, when last week when I was doing research for today, just to get ready, I just Googled the title of your show, and there were so many stories from women, only from women, that were talking about how they were from Russia, the former Soviet Union, and how they were just, there was no room for rebellion or feeling or vocalization of anything different than what the state deemed you to feel or say. Mm-hmm. And listening to Judit also, you know, go into your show and have similar feelings, it makes me think about just this idea of how can, in your practice and all of your practices, how have you seen art lead to healing, and for yourselves and for people that like interact with your work, or collaborators in the pieces that you make? Because I know you're all very much like you have your studio, but you're working with folks in the community. So I'll begin with Marielena.
Bingo. Well, yeah, you know, I had like that daydream that my work, because I'm a rebel with a cause, I was not, we don't use, I was born in Venezuela when Venezuela was a democratic republic. We were not told to be quieter than water, but teachers at school were always telling me that they were going to cut my tongue because I couldn't stop talking. And I was like, well, you're not going to stop me from talking, so I'm going to keep talking. So for me, art has been not only an extension of that talking, those things that I want to say, but also a way of heal. You were talking about heal about those stories, that when we get to hear other stories that maybe are similar to ours, we realize we were not the only ones, or maybe there are similar experiences, even if it's different stories. But when I was growing up and I wanted to say so many things, and I was like almost growing an internal rage because I was not told exactly those words, but society tells you shut up, right? Because it's not appropriate, because it's politically incorrect, because you cannot tell people. So I have that daydream that with my art I could slap people in the face, right? Because I cannot do that. Obviously, if I start slapping people, I'm gonna get in trouble. And I'm a very, very nonviolent kind of person. But my art sort of do that for me in a way that is very subtle, or at least I want it to be subtle. Not because I want to slap people, it's because I want them to somehow shake and realize, like, did you notice this? Where were you when this happened? Or what would you do if you know that this is happening on your name? When we talk about that, My Broken Monarchs, when we talk about that over 5,000 children and babies and toddlers that were separated from their families just to make a point, just to tell you to keep your way of living, to keep America safe. I mean, how do you feel when those things are done on your name, for your comfort, for your way of living? So that's my way of saying, like, what do you think about this? I'm not telling you what to do, but I want you to somehow rethink in that situation in particular. But also how we can do it better, right? It's not just, okay, we have a problem and let's cry or let's do noise. What can we do to heal? How we can look into a future that maybe is less gray or monochromatic and more colorful. And maybe that's why also I'm so driven too. Well, also in the tropic we are very colorful. So, but I love the colors. So even though my monarchs are like traumatized children, they're full of colors, and all of them are unique, because there is still the hope that all of them are gonna heal, that all of them are gonna develop resilience, and that all of them are gonna fly in a metaphorical way. So there is always that. Yes, we have this situation that moves collective trauma and specific trauma in different cases, but there's also a conversation. That's why I definitely went into social practice, because for me the work needs to come together with the conversation, with the process of healing, and also with the intervention of the community. So I'm not the only author of the work. Right. It's a collective work, and also I learn from the stories and perspective and the experiences of the people, and that keeps feeding and growing the work. I don't know if I answered your question.
You did. You
okay,
absolutely
good. Good.
And Viktorsha?
Yeah, similarly to Marielena, I think it's important for me to think about the way that the art itself can be maybe a visual representation of something that is often on the sidelines, and of the narratives that we often maybe are unnoticed. For this specific work that in the show that's up right now, I worked with the community, meaning the immigrant community that were from former Soviet Union countries. And it was really important. The work is biographical, but at the same time it was a collective experience of first and foremost listening to people's stories and sitting with their experiences. And I think before, especially as photographers and as artists, first and foremost, we have to understand that when we're working with communities, when we're photographing them, like even the idea of like taking someone's photograph can become this, camera can be like a weapon of imperialism. Yeah. And Ariella Azoulay, I love her work. Yeah. I always quote her because she's incredible. But I always think about how can we decolonize a space, and how can we really unpack the way that oppression has been used by patriarchy and by other systems in power. So for me, that is actually going in and listening to people's stories, listening to stories by women, by people who have had their voices be silenced, listening to archives that are currently banned in Russia. And for this work specifically, I also did a lot of research with Memorial, which is a human rights organization in Moscow that is currently banned under Putin since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And anyone kind of that works with those archives, and it's archives that deal with political repressions in the Soviet Union, and oversees that close to 20 million people were sent to gulags or forced labor camps in the Soviet Union. There's no history of it in Russia, and it's banned to talk about it. So I wanted to think about how is it when we don't talk about this history that it repeats again, right? And so what is it, what are we left to do that when we as artists, we are confronted with lack of, there is this, I guess, constructed reality, right? You have a constructed reality when you live in a regime. You have to go to your community, and you have to really do your own research and your own history, and work with archives that are banned, and also work with the people and listen to their stories. So in that sense, I think community is really important for my own practice. And similarly, I think with all of us sitting here. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about this idea of decolonizing spaces. It made me think of a photographer who I really admire, Nydia Blas, who she doesn't use the term subjects. So she says collaborators.
Yep.
She works with, she's actually from Ithaca. She's originally from upstate. And then also when she exhibits her work, if there's a piece that is a little bit more sensitive or vulnerable, she frames that piece with two other pieces as kind of covers or like bookends. And Judit, it made me think of your work that really acts as a bridge in multiple ways. The process that you're using wet plate and creating tintypes, one of the first ways of documenting and having photographs, but you're using this process in your series, A Long Journey Home, to take portraits of refugees who came from the Middle East, East Africa, Asia, who are looking for safety and a future home for their families. So, you know, you're playing with this idea of coming to the U.S. for a better life at a time when traditionally people did this in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So how do you really see photography as this kind of creative space between generations and kind of portals to the past, but reimagining the future?
Yeah, so using this process for this particular project and some of my other projects that are also carry social and political meanings, the intention is to relate back to the past. So when I photographed or choose the process to photograph refugees with this process, I was imagining those immigrants who came to Ellis Island between 1880 and 1920. That was the height or the peak of the immigration to this country, when I think it was like 25 million people came during that 40-year period. And also, this was a time when my process were heavily used. That was pretty much the main process that photographers used to document the immigration of that time. And by connecting contemporary portraits of refugees and kind of comparing the image to the image that came out of photographers like Augustus Sherman and Louis Hine, who made these beautiful portraits of immigrants in their original clothing, and all the portraits to me were very kind of dignifying the people who arrived here. I wanted to do the same with these people whose voices were not heard, who came here because of running from war or poverty, just like the people who came at that time. And yeah, I don't know, did I answer your question?
You did.
Okay.
You absolutely did. I wanted to talk a little bit about materials and process. I think it's a good segue. And Viktorsha, how do you use domestic practices like sewing and handcraft? How do you think they offer ways of documenting history, like a way into history that other mediums don't?
Yeah, I think because I research memory, and I always think about memory as this like kind of thing that we have in our head often. It's hard to reach. It's hard to materialize it. For me, I've recently been working a lot with fabric and sewing because it allows for me to materialize something that is perhaps often feels out of reach or ephemeral, and put it into sculptural form. So specifically, for this show, I worked on with cloth because I was thinking about the relationship of cloth to our own bodies. And I began this work by using my own bed sheets and sewing my own on my own bed sheets, because Marielena and I, we talked about this on Radio Kingston already, so I'm sorry to repeat this information again about my bed sheets. But I really think about the way that we as artists, we are able to put our touch and our hand into the work. And by working with my own bed sheets and using them, I was able to not only have a piece of my body and use something that I slept on, something that carries my dreams. It has this closeness to me, but also I also thought about the way that the cloth becomes this archive as well. And through sewing, sewing began as this process of perhaps healing, right? Like it feels like I was sewing together these pieces of my bed sheets using my family archives and other archives. And it felt very symbolic. The mending of this cloth became a process of internal healing and connecting and repairing the history that has been perhaps omitted. So in a way, it was collecting all these fragments of the history that I was never told and that I never got to see. So through sewing and through this embodied practice, it was not only just the thread of actually connecting the pieces physically, but also it became symbolic of really understanding of where I was at, where I came from.
You know, it's so funny, when I walked into the space, the first word I thought of was cocooned, and thinking of working with your bed sheets. You get that feeling when you're in this space, that it is a space of that's very intimate,
yeah.
Super, super intimate. Marielena, this kind of idea of clothes or materiality becoming the archive and how material can repair histories that have been omitted makes me think of your project, Broken Monarchs, where you use butterflies as a metaphor for the fragility and the resilience of, as you said earlier, more than 5,000 migrant children who were separated from their parents under the Trump Pence administration's zero tolerance policy. It really looks at the beauty and the symbolism and how that can mobilize civic awareness and also empathy. So can you talk about how did you get to the point in your artistic practice of thinking, okay, like the monarch butterfly, like this is what I'm going to work with. This is what I'm going to repeat in my sculpture. How did your artistic practice travel and end up at that point?
I think that the monarch butterfly chose me. That this been said a lot, but I was not original in that. In the West Coast, there is an artist who started working with monarch butterflies and started this campaign called "Migration is Beautiful." Maybe some of you have seen it, and I was like, it's true, migration is beautiful. And the monarch butterfly is one of the most amazing migrations that happen in the planet. And, it's this little animal that also needs at least 50 degrees of temperature to be able to fly. And the little thing goes millions of miles to go from Mexico to the United States. So I guess that I discovered the capacity of the butterflies to convey a lot of things, and also at the same time to talk about ecologies and about how important it is for our own food system that the monarch butterflies and other pollinators are able to do what they do the best. But then tie that to the political aspect of my work. In 6 months, Mexico, United States, and Canada put together legislation to protect the monarch butterfly migration. So when there is political willness, things happen. So I was also confronting another tension on how we are able to protect one kind of migration at the same time that we attack another kind of migration using the same symbol that is being used for both. So I guess that, as I said before, I go with the material itself, in this case, with the concept of what the monarch was conveying. But then my choice of the material is paper, and it's tissue paper. I tend to work with the most humble of materials, tissue paper, poison ivy leaves, things that nobody does art with those things, and that they are not going to last forever. They are not archived. And I was not sewing like Viktorsha. I was tearing apart the paper. So it's this process of deconstructing that reality in a different story and then composing in a different way to tell another story. But it's a process that I don't start consciously. Oh, I'm going to do this. It's like I start thinking in something that concerns me or about a story that I would like to put out there. And then I just start looking around and things start popping up.
Right.
And then, I tend to say also that my studio, more than a studio, is a lab. I do a lot of experiments first, and I do a lot of research. And then the things start getting together with the participation and the huge collaboration of the community too. Because for these over 5,000 butterflies, many communities got together with me to tear the paper, although some people were not able to do that because it gets emotional sometimes. But at the same time that we are in those having those conversations and understanding what is happening and how that relate with our lives. Most of the people, for instance, even though this project is about or involved the stories of many migrants, many of the people that attended the workshop, they were not migrants themselves, but they could relate to those stories in different circumstances of life. So they could see that, okay, I'm not an immigrant, but this story affects me because I also go through different processes that eventually whatever it is for any person. So that's another thing that I wanted to highlight, because sometimes we get a little bit trapped in the thing that, oh, these are immigrant stories that relates or pertains only to immigrant people, and I'm not an immigrant, for whatever the reason. Because I don't know how many people in the room feel that they are immigrants or not, but do you mind if I ask you how many of you are consider yourself immigrants? You can raise your hand. Okay, so we have a few. And let me ask you something. How many of you were born in Kingston? Look at that. So these two girls are the only ones that are not immigrants, just so you know. Just saying. According to the International Office of Migration, any person that crosses any kind of border, national or international, for work or for living, engage in migration. So when we change that perspective, and this is part of our work, I'm talking about you too, I'm bringing you into this thing, is to we are all in this, right? It affects all of us. And these processes, as Viktorsha was saying, it's not just what you see or what you understand, but the repetition of the work gets embodied in a way that is not only reflective in the work when you are doing it, but in whatever is left, that eventually the work can be seen and I would say experienced.
Yeah, I mean, I think you made, when you were speaking, the first thing that came to my mind, and I think often as women and women artists, we are told to kind of stay in our lane, and you're like, no, but you're an immigrant, I'm an immigrant. We're all we're all here on journeys, and it's incredible how you, and I think all three of you, don't limit yourself in what you think you can say and what you think you are supposed to say, and how you very deeply know that there are histories that need to be brought forward. And I wonder, Judit, there are I think in this moment in particular, so many of us, I think all of us on this panel, all of the folks in this room realize there are so many narratives that are being repressed. I see it even when I just read the New York Times now. Things just look different in so many ways. And so, Judit, I wanted to begin with you. How do you choose which histories or which narratives to bring forward? Marielena spoke about how the butterfly chose her, right? It's kind of how it kind of came to you. How do you choose what histories to bring forward? And in this particular moment, what histories are you thinking of bringing forward in your work?
Well, since my work is mostly, it's artistic and documentary also, with the oral histories that being recorded, I try to illuminate the history of the person, because I think it's very important for us to learn from those histories and then bring them forward as examples of hey, this has been happening for how many centuries,
Right.
And it's nothing different than what America experienced from the beginning, and what I kind of leave for the so I try to elevate their voices, to tell their stories, and what I kind of try to leave for the audience who look at the work is just make their own connection, looking at the work, and then make the association of what I'm trying to say in their own ways. So looking at the process, maybe they think, it's a black and white process. Well, it really, looks like those old photographs that their grandparents collected and then make the association that, well, we are all immigrants. Unless you're Native American, you're all immigrant on this land. So you all came from somewhere. So that's how I try to do it.
Mm-hmm. Viktorsha?
Yeah, similarly, I would say I think the work finds you or finds me. It always, I think, starts. I think, Marielena, you always say, like, every work that you make is a self-portrait,
Yeah.
right? So every work that you
Even
make...
though when you don't want it to be, right?
Yeah, because in a way, like, you're talking about experience, perhaps your own experiences through one form or the other, through the work that you make. So, yeah, while this work is, I think, somewhat biographical, it's I think in order to understand the collective experience, we have to listen to individual stories, right? So in order to understand the big picture, it's the stories that we are sharing here with one another. So you have to understand the individual to get the big picture, so.
You know, we're in a very difficult time right now. Often when I open up my phone and I click on The Guardian and it says we're only 9 months into, the beginning of this regime, I'm just like, oh, this has been the most exhausting
10 years.
9 months. Yeah, we all kind of have these feelings of, I can't believe it's just been 9 months, or I can't believe it's just been 6 months, or it hasn't even been kind of a year. And how do you find in this moment, and I think one thing that we don't ask artists or women enough, like, how do you make sure that you are taking care of yourself, and how is that showing up in your work as well?
Who wants to start?
Marielena.
Well, since my last work has been, my current research is on poison ivy that has been so vilified. Do you know poison ivy, right? Okay. All of you have a relationship with poison ivy, not the nicer ones, right? So it is funny because in my rebellious nature, everybody hates poison ivy, and that's what attracted me. I was like, what is with this plant that everybody hates it? And that we have so much around, right? There is a lot. Talking about healing and taking care, poison ivy was considered for some of the Native Americans were not only considered but called like a healing blanket, because it covers the soil that we disturb and that we deplete of nutrients and heal it. The same way that a wound that we want to heal eventually needs to be covered until it heals, right? And we should not remove that bandage until the wound is healed. But we keep removing the bandage. We keep removing poison ivy, and the wound is not being healed, and we just exacerbate the situation. But that's a different story. So working, doing this research and learning so much about the plant and how much the ecosystem create those self-healing systems embedded in the same ecosystem make me think a lot of that kind of thing. Okay, how we really take care of ourselves too, how we get covered with our own healing blankets when we need them, even though you use your bed sheets to do the work, and then I start pulling leaves of poison ivy to create a shroud. And my idea was to definitely cover with it and try to feel or represent somehow that process of healing. So I guess that is a personal practice for everyone, how to do that kind of thing. But for me, because I'm a freaky researcher, that really settles me, makes me like, okay, how I can take care of myself. Poison ivy also taught me the best kind of mindfulness. You know, that is like on fashion. Everybody's doing mindfulness, but nothing better than to walk around a poison ivy patch, because you are mindful of every inch of your body if you don't want to get in trouble, right? And it's great because definitely you are in the present. You are looking for all those things. You are observing the ecosystem, all the animals, the benefits from this plant, for instance, also makes me feel like, you know, who are we to judge? And it's the same way that we judge so many people because we don't understand what they are doing. During the pandemic, we were like, oh, our heroes, the essential workers, you know, that were like poison ivy out there day in and day out. And now we sort of like forgot that thing again, and we start vilifying many people too. So when I think on those things and try to be humbled and realize, well, up to what point I'm also a participant on that dynamic, right? How I can also make a difference for me and for others, not only for my loved ones, but, you know, for the community, for the whatever. So I guess that my way of taking care of myself and to be able to continue doing the work is to understand also how important the work is, and how the work itself, with those mending and those processes, are also helping me feel better. I'm not going to say protected, but somehow that same encouragement to keep going help you also. I don't know if to call it like self-help. I don't like the term, but you know, somehow like to be mindful of when you need your time, when you need to cry, when you need to be alone, when you need to rest, when you need to eat, and all those things. It's, for me, it's part of the work itself.
Yeah. What about you, Viktorsha?
She goes with the poison ivy too.
I think that taking care right now means gathering and creating safe spaces for other folks. And I think that being able to share stories and being able to share our experiences, that for me is an act of self-care, right? And it actually is also joy, and sharing is an act of resistance. Because I think that when we are not able to share our stories, and we're not able to voice that which perhaps our experiences are, and I don't think all protests need to be loud. I think like you can protest quietly. You can protest with a cup of tea. You can protest by being here today. You know, like we are standing up and we're taking care of ourselves by sharing these experiences, collective experiences of others, but also when you share, you're able to you can no longer pretend like something didn't happen, or you're sort of releasing something into the world, and you're creating, you're giving birth to something. And I think for me that is the biggest way of self-care, is when we're able to voice our own experiences in a safe space, and also provide space for others to be heard and seen, especially a lot of queer, trans, BIPOC folks and people from marginalized communities right now under this government. So, yeah.
What about you, Judit?
Well, I think for me, the most healing thing is making connections and cultivating belonging. When I think I talked about it earlier, that I chose not to kind of work on my own immigrant experience. That's why I started to tell other stories. I very quickly realized that we all shared the refugees and I, or the immigrants and I, shared the experience of not belonging anywhere. I mean, we felt that, or I felt that I didn't belong in my own country because since I left, everything changed. The language changed, the food changed, people changed. And when I visited, I didn't feel like I belonged there anymore. But I'm an immigrant and I have an accent, and I felt I didn't belong here either. And then talking to those people who were refugees, and then they were also craving something from the old country, that was not, not anything like that they remembered when they left. We kind of connected, and we shared, stories of our own experience. And we felt, it was kind of ironic that I felt a belonging among the people who felt that they didn't belong anywhere. Mm-hmm. And I think that was kind of a beautiful thing, and that's why we all want to belong somewhere, and I try to kind of think of how I can connect with people, and how can I cultivate my own community where I feel safe and I can flourish.
Right, yeah, I feel like in this moment we're all cultivating community in really much needed and interesting ways. Viktorsha, you said this phrase of how, through kind of care and through your process, that we can no longer pretend something didn't happen, right? Which made me think not only about history, but our future. And I really wonder kind of what futures are you imagining or insisting in your work?
It's a hard question because to connect it back to kind of the beginning of this panel discussion, I'm thinking about the power of imagination and the power of being able to even imagine something, right? Being able to imagine a positive future, or being able to imagine like a future that I would want to see, is something that's been really hard for me, I guess, because where I come from, we don't dream. And the future, now that I'm outside of that, and now that I live in the United States, I'm able to see that what I would like to see, I guess, is a way that how can we have a world where we honor everyone's story, everyone has a voice, and where we don't live in a world of violence and colonialism. I don't know if that's ever going to happen.
I don't know.
But
I hope so.
I hope so too. But I would like to see a future where we have women's leadership, and
We do.
we do right here, and where we can honor that which has been repressed and suppressed. So that for me is a positive way of like imagining what does the future look like. So maybe listening, breaking down the old systems of repression and oppression, and like just deconstructing the empire, or like just knock down the empire and rebuild, and through matriarchy and through voices that are often unseen. I think that for me would be a positive future. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you all it's one question, but a kind of two-part question. And then I have a little something to read, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. I'll start with you, Judit. What do you hope everyone here leaves with after this discussion, and what are you working on next?
What I hope, Well, I hope that we all created a community here that listens and open to listen to different voices, being that immigrants or queer stories or the any stories of the marginalized, and just listen to each other and create a community that can fight back and resist. That's what I hope. What I'm working on now, I'm expanding my MFA project on issues about that I started after the Dobbs decision. So I'm working on a feminist project, telling my own story as a woman, and I also working on expanding that with aging of women, talking about menopause and how, and kind of thinking about how the patriarchy created this system where aging women are viewed as unwanted, and yeah, so it's kind of a long story. I just stopped there.
Interesting.
Marielena, what do you hope everyone here leaves with, and what are you working on next?
Well, I hope that all of you realize that you are immigrants, except the two of you. I really hope that, that everyone feels encouraged also to not only listen to those stories, but to also relate to those stories and to make space for those stories and for your own stories, and to see how they are so similar, because we keep putting labels and trying to understand, and we get lost on that. So if we can connect with those human part of us and respect others' stories and to listen to them, I think would be great. Now I have two art projects, because I keep doing my research with poison ivy, and I'm doing lacquer with the sap of poison ivy, and I'm more now into the kintsugi, that is the Japanese art of repairing, talking about repairing, and I love to work with fragments and how we put those fragments together, and how it's not to pretend that nothing happened. No, I want to see the scars. I want to see the stories, because that's another way of putting the stories in the material that we are working with. But Unison is taking more of my time, so that's my art project, to be able to have Unison as this sort of like a rebel art center that is not completely conventional. So we're working on that, and whatever comes, because I didn't realize, it's not that I get distracted easily, but I'm doing something and eventually I found something and I was like, oh, what is there? And then you go to that rabbit hole, and then the other and the other. So keep the curiosity out there.
What about you, Viktorsha?
What I'm working on currently.
And what would you like people to leave with today?
I guess I would like for people to leave with, definitely more of a sense of a community here in Kingston. And thinking about, that we have all migrated at some point, and that oftentimes that perhaps our own personal experiences are always universal in some kind of way. We all have a point of connection, even if we all come from different places. I'm always working like 10,000 things at once, but I want to continue on working with not the quilts, but the patchworks. The patchworks that I currently have in the show, that's one project that I would like to continue, and really thinking about that the photographic evidence reshapes how it shapes our history and cultural landscape and the future. So sort of continuing with the cyanotype process and then expanding it and working with installations. So there'll be another
That's
installation
exciting.
coming
Very
soon.
exciting. Thank you all for this great
Thank you.
conversation. I'm going to read a portion of an essay to close us out, and then we'll have some Q&A. How does it sound? And, if anyone needs to, y'all have been sitting down, like, get up, stretch. I know it's kind of hard to be seated for so long. But when I was researching this panel, I wanted to share something and read something. And there were some essays that I found that I loved, but the writers would always frame an artist as a man, and they would, they would talk about just like people as men. It was just like men, and there was kind of no openness. And I found this essay by Audre Lorde, a Black feminist, poet, incredible activist, The Transformation of Silence into Language and Action. And she, at one point, 2 doctors found a tumor in her breast. And they thought it was 70 to 80%. The tumor was going to be malignant. And she wrote this essay in between the 3 weeks of having the surgery to take out the tumor and finding out whether it was malignant or benign. And she talks about how this was just such a pressured, tough time. So I'll read a little bit from this essay. In becoming forcibly and essentially aware of my mortality and what I wished and wanted for my life, however short it might be, priorities or omissions became strongly etched in a merciless light. And what I most regretted were my silences. Of what had I ever been afraid? To question or to speak, as I believed, could have meant pain or death. But we all hurt in so many different ways all the time, and pain will either change or end. Death, on the other hand, is the final silence. And that might be coming quickly now, without regard for whether I had spoken what needed to be said or whether I had betrayed myself into small silences while I'd planned someday to speak or waited for someone else's word. I began to recognize a source of power within myself that comes from the knowledge that while it is most desirable not to be afraid, learning to put fear into a perspective gave me great strength. I was going to die, if not sooner than later, whether I had ever spoken myself. My silence had not protected me. Your silence will not protect you. But for every word spoken, for every attempt I had made to speak those truths for which I am still seeking, I had made contact with other women. While we examined the words to fit a world in which we all believed, bridging our differences. And it was concern and caring of all those women which gave me the strength and enabled me to scrutinize the essentials of my living. The women who sustained me through that period were Black and white. They were old and they were young. They were lesbian, bisexual, and heterosexual. We all shared a war against the tyrannies of silence. They all gave me a strength and concern without which I could not have survived intact. Within those weeks of acute fear came the knowledge. Within the war, we are all raging with the forces of death, subtle or otherwise, conscious or not. I am not only a casualty, I am also a warrior.
Wow.
Thank you all for coming. And I open it up to Q&A. Just raise your hands and then we'll call on you. I see you in the yellow jacket. What's your name?
Hello, my name is Ina, and I have a question for Viktorsha. You mentioned that you work with archives, and I'm genuinely interested in hearing because I connect better through specificity. How do you approach archives? What are you looking for? What do you find there? And where do you take it from there? Maybe just, I know it's a big process, but maybe you could share a little bit about this part of your journey?
Sure. Can folks hear in the back okay? So about archives. I've worked, okay, so initially, I guess my practice began working with public archives. I guess when I approach a body of work, I think about my own connection to the land that I'm from and the archives that are there that are currently being erased, right? Because I think about the way that, I think Masha Gessen, they say, an archive only survives when it is being used, right? So if you don't use something, it becomes, it dissipates, right? It vanishes. So I think it's really important to continue using stories that are perhaps at risk. So working with memorial archives, I guess to answer your question, I think there's a personal connection for me there, because I think about the political regime and the political repression, and I began by working on that project shortly right before Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So there was already this like political climate of people being arrested, people being forced into forced labor camps, and so I thought it was really important to begin working with the archives of the people that were sent and exiled and murdered by the Soviet regime at a time when there was war happening. So that's kind of how I began. I think, try to connect the present to the past. And I also work with my own family archives because I have a personal connection to what's happening right now in Russia. Yeah.
I think there was another hand up behind.
Yeah, hi. I just want to say I admire your ability to express your art in these very vulnerable times, and you are a vulnerable population, more so than many others that are in this room. And I was wondering, I know Judit spoke specifically about how she dealt with the fear by photographing others and not her own story. So I don't know if you want to expand on that. And also, Viktorsha, could you say that phrase in Russian?
The what?
Could you say the phrase in Russian, the idiom in Russian?
Quieter than water, lower than grass. Тише воды, ниже травы. Тише воды, ниже травы. What was your other question? I lost it.
For Judy. About the
Was
photo.
for me?
Yeah.
Well, I think you addressed it, but if you want to say more about how you deal with the fear and repression that you grew up with, and you're able to still express yourself through your art in these very vulnerable times, and being part of a vulnerable population.
Yeah, so I have a very complicated history with my own country. You might know Orbán Viktor, which is the current president of Hungary, and I have family members who adore him, and so I have a very complicated relationship with both my family and the history of the country and the current development, politics that's going on. Well, not that current because he's been there for 15 years. So it created a very, it made me very vulnerable to kind of express myself in a way that I would be saying things that I didn't want my family to know. That was one part of it, and the other was this transgenerational trauma that I talked about of not wanting to express myself, be quiet about, or not talk about things that makes me vulnerable. and maybe exposed. So that's behind my decision not to work with my own history. Although I did start, and I'm going back to the archives. There is a fabulous collection of historical images from 1900s to I think 1990 in Hungary. That it's a public archive where people can just freely upload images that they have in their own family archives. To a server. It's called Fortepan. It's a nonprofit organization, and so it's public. It's everything is, what is it called? Stock images becomes available, and now I think they studied like 5 years ago, and now like over 200,000 images in that archive. So you can go back and then look at. So now I can go back and look at the images from my childhood, because you can also search for it by year of when the image was taken or supposed to be taken. So I will at some point I will go back and or I started to look at it, but you have to be very intentional and collecting those images and then what you want to say with it, and I just have to get there. Did I answer the question? Yeah. Did I answer your question? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Do you all have questions?
There's a question there.
This is for Viktorsha. I was wondering if you found any significance between kind of the relationship of the omitted historical context and like the revealing nature of like cyanotype as like a medium.
Well, I think the cyanotype, it's a really interesting process because first it's never really, it changes over time, right? So it like mutates and fades. So using this process allowed for me, it was really, it is very symbolic in my practice, because I do think about the way that even in order for an image to register, you have to, on fabric, you have to coat the fabric, and then you have to dry it, and it sort of warps and mutates, and then you have to use the sun or some kind of light to register information, to register an image, and then that image registers onto fabric, which it materializes something that you have felt maybe too afraid to share, or something that you have been quiet about, and your own history that you've been silenced about, you're now able to materialize it into this form. And you're able to put that form in a room, and people are going to walk through that space. And the washing of the cyanotype and putting this image after it's in the sun and water reveals, right, the final story of what you're trying to say. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, I think that kind of like figuring out what the story was, what the narrative was directly related to the material I was using, but also to the process of the cyanotype itself, because there's so much room for like error with it, and for warping of and mutation, which I think is symbolic of the way that our memory and our history shapes and reshapes itself. And we here are all active participants of the present, and we all have a voice, and it's really important to use your voice. So cyanotype is kind of my voice at this time, but who knows? Maybe I'll start welding steel.
Go for it.
So, any other questions?
Any other questions? Uh-huh.
I have a question.
Oh, okay.
They're very advanced and very easy. So when you, and this for in monkey, when you use archival materials, families' stories or the stories of others, how do you decide what belongs in the work and what remains private?
That's a great. So the question for everyone in the room was, when you're using archival materials, how do you decide what you're going to bring forward and what remains like private? It's a great question, I think, for all three of you.
Well, I don't use archival materials, so they are gonna vanish.
Or in even like working with communities.
Yeah, well, I don't know, at least for me, I guess I take the risk. I'm not really pondering how far that is gonna be, or how much you can contain the information that is putting out there. Yeah, interesting. I don't remember myself thinking about that. If there is something that eventually I don't want to say, well, I make sure that I don't say that. But yeah, I guess that at some point I just take whatever it takes. Yeah.
For me, I began this project and a lot of my projects by doing oral histories before I even like dive into the archives. And then while I'm working with the archives, I go back and I listen to the stories of what the people that I interviewed, what they were sharing. And I think so it's like a combination of working with the archives and seeing what has been revealed in the oral histories, and then deciding, deciding what the right visual language for that work will be. But I also think like you can have something in your head of what something's going to look like, and have an intention for a certain piece, and then when you make it, it might look completely different than what you imagine. So I think it's partially like you can have as much intention, but you don't know until you're making the piece, and you have to make those decisions. I don't have a straightforward answer, but I just listen to the oral histories that for this specific body of work, I had to re-listen and decide what angle I wanted to approach it at. And then you had a question here.
Oh, I wanted to give Judit
yes,
an opportunity.
Well, I
to
don't
answer.
really use the archive. I mean, I haven't used the archive much. For me, dealing with collaborators, I'm always driven by protecting privacy and protecting their interest and themselves, because you can put people into harm's way if you expose something that that can cause them harm. So that's all I consider.
So I was just thinking about like the kind of collective theme of using your voices, right? And I was curious if each of you had like advice for other artists that maybe feel in any capacity maybe like they don't belong, or othered, or in any kind of way, maybe like as a black sheep of a group or community, family, like moving forward and finding their voices as artists. Like if there was anything that helped you guys get past like a point of uncertainty or doubt in yourself and the way you maybe feel you present to the world.
Well, you did say something before that I can't totally resonate with you. I feel always like an outsider. It doesn't matter where I am. Yeah, I was not born in this country. I cannot go back to my country. I don't belong to this country. Even though the Hudson Valley has been very welcoming to me, there is always something that reminds you, even with the best of the intentions, that you don't belong. Even when the first question is, oh, where are you from? So obviously they are telling you, you are not from here. Just that make it clear at the very beginning. And that's fine. Turning. Well, it's fine because I understand. I give the benefit that the person is not doing that with bad intention. even though it feels, because the meta message is you don't belong here, so where are you coming from, right? But maybe because also when I was growing up, just because I saw my siblings and we look alike, that was the only thing that was making me feel like, okay, you were not adopted because all of them look like you. But I have been always feeling like I don't belong. I'm in the wrong place. Where is my tribe? Where I'm gonna do this? Or because it's always like I'm the black sheep. I'm the one that people want to stop. Well, they want me to stop talking. For instance, even with art, I just decided to become an artist by the pandemic. So I'm an outsider even in the world of art. How to overcome that? I guess that at this point I'm proud an outsider, and I just embrace that that's what it is. Sometimes it feels like very isolated, but at the same time, it's something that moves you to not to try to belong because you need to belong, but to try to find what are those authentic connections, not because I need them, but because I'm going to connect just for the sake of, because there is a real connection there. But I think that as an artist, it's a good place to be because it triggers a bunch of creative processes out of that. But also, again, it depends on I guess that it depends on many circumstances for everybody. But yes, I'm with you, Judy. You don't belong here, you don't belong there, but we keep going. I'm an optimist, even though the work keeps hitting me hard, but, it's like maybe because, I'm very stubborn. I think at some point we establish those connections, and then you can move within that space, even though there is always something. But because we are individuals anyway, right? We belong to a community, but each one of us keep our individuality too. So I guess that it will depend.
What I could say that being vulnerable and showing your vulnerability is also power. So I guess we artists, we need to learn to go with it and just create work around it. And hoping that he's not gonna. So and then and to be able to do that, I think you have to find your own community, right. People who are alike, and then just create something together and create belonging, create your own world, basically.
Yep.
I echo everything that's been said. I think, being an artist, it's hard work, and I think not everyone's always going to understand it. But I think more than ever, it's important for us to gather together. And to find like-minded folks and to organize and to have this space to share our own experiences, even if we're all from different places, to feel like you can be seen, right? You can be seen and you can be heard by that which you surround yourself with, by the community that you create. And I always like to say that we're like trees, right? We need our own inner network. And that's how we can thrive and we can build.
Yeah, I wanted to mention how important it is to build community. I'm finding in-person community being really important in this moment. But your question reminded me of one of these essays that I love. It's a very male-forward essay, but James Baldwin, The Creative Process, is this kind of really incredible essay. And he talks about part of being an artist, and the role of an artist is knowing that you will be alone. Yeah. It's very lonely. And part of the reason why it's so lonely is because you're saying things that people don't want to hear. And you have to kind of confront them yourself and grapple with that, and then push that out into the world and show them things that they may not want to see sometimes. And I think it's hard. I think right now it's like, it's so hard, especially for so many of us. We're seeing institutions and people that we thought were these heroes and monuments of truth kind of caving. And that's when it becomes even harder, and why you need your in-person community, and why the work that these three amazing artists are doing, and I'm sure the work you're doing, is like needed now more than ever. So thank you all for coming. I'm sure we'll be mingling for a little bit.
Yeah.
Feel free
And-
to
And thank you, Zoraida.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone. Thank you.
What was the title of the essay of James Baldwin?
The
James
creative
Baldwin.
process.
That's creative process.
Yeah. I love it. It's a good one.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely some